Hi, everybody, and welcome to New Consciousness Review. I'm Miriam Knight, and our guest today is Paul Hellyer, one of Canada's best-known and probably most controversial politicians. He was first elected in 1949, and he became the youngest cabinet minister in Saint Laurent's government, and subsequently served as Minister of Defense under Lester Pearson and as Deputy Prime Minister under Pierre Elliott Trudeau. He resigned from the Trudeau cabinet over a question of principle related to housing. And although Hellyer is best known for the unification of the Canadian Armed Forces and for his 1968 chairmanship of the Task Force on Housing and Urban Development, he has maintained a lifelong interest in macroeconomics. Through the years as a journalist and political commentator, he has continued to fight for economic reforms and has written several books on the subject. A man of many interests, Hellyer's ideas are not classroom abstractions. He was born and raised on a farm, and his business experience includes manufacturing, retailing, construction, land development, tourism, and publishing. He has also been active in community affairs, including the arts. His multifaceted career, in addition to a near lifetime in politics, gives Hellyer a rare perspective on what has gone wrong with world economies. In recent years, he has become interested in the extraterrestrial presence and their superior technology that we have been emulating. In September 2005, he became the first person of cabinet rank in the G8 group of countries to state unequivocally, UFOs are as real as the airplanes flying overhead. Well, buckle your seatbelts. It is going to be an interesting show. So, Paul Hellyer, it is an honor to welcome you to the show.
It's a delight to be with you.
Now, you made the rather provocative statement that the world financial system is one gargantuan Ponzi scheme. I would like to explore that step by step, including how it started, who is benefiting, and what is the prognosis for the rest of us.
Well, it's one of the most interesting subjects in the world and one of the least understood. I would guess that only about maybe 1 in 100 of the people who listen to your show would understand really what money is, where it comes from, who manufactures it, and all of the intricacies that are relevant to what is at the present time the most urgent problem in the whole world system that I know of. I claim that global warming is the most important, in the sense that if we don't do something about that and do it quickly, the world is going to change irrevocably. So that is number one in priority as far as importance is concerned. But the financial system is the most urgent, because if we don't change the financial system, we won't be in a position to afford to change the heating system, the energy system, from fossil fuels to clean energy fast enough to save the world from overheating. So what I was referring to, and I called the international financial system a Ponzi scheme, is basically that a very privileged group of people, the bankers of the world, are able to lend the same money to several different people and collect interest on it from each one at the same time. Now, if you or I tried to do that, we'd go to jail, because it would be breaking the law. But somehow, over 2.5 centuries, a very small elite group of people have managed to convince kings, queens, emperors, and presidents and prime ministers and legislatures to legalize what none of the rest of us are able to do and are allowed to do. And this, of course, has a long, long history, and you can go way back. But I sort of start the story at the time of the charter of the Bank of England
In the 1600s.
Yeah, 1690 or something like that. Whoa, way back, eh? And King William was waging a war on the continent. He ran out of money. So somebody said, well, why don't you start a bank? That sounded like a good idea. So he got some rich friends in London, England, to put up £1,200,000 in gold and silver and subscribe it to the bank. And then they lent all of that money to him at 8%, which incidentally is a pretty high interest rate for a government guaranteed loan. But then, to show his gratitude, this has become typical of the history of the world since then, to show his gratitude, he said, now you can print, P-R-I-N-T, print £1,200,000 in banknotes and lend them to your friends at high interest rates. So that's what the bank did. So in effect, they were lending their capital twice, once to the king, the government at 8%, and once to their customers, their friends at high interest rates. So we call that leverage, 2 to 1, and they were lending the same money twice and collecting interest from both at the same time. Well, over the years, that ratio has become much more generous due to the avarice, I guess, of the bankers and the collusion, cooperation, whatever you want to call it, sometimes one and sometimes the other and sometimes both of the politicians. That ratio of 2 to 1 has increased dramatically. In the early years of the 20th century, in the United States, for example, federally chartered banks had to have a gold reserve of 25%, actually have the gold stashed in their vaults as a deposit against their depositors' money.
Like Fort Knox.
Yeah, something like that. And so they were allowed, in effect, to lend the same money 4 times. In Canada, when I was young, the banks had to have a cash reserve of 8%. So they were, in effect, allowed to lend the same money 12.5 times. Well, before the recent meltdown in New York, and which spread all over the world and has devastated the whole world economic system, New York banks were lending the same money to 20 or more different people at the same time, including governments, and collecting money from each one. Now, this is fraud. This is total fraud, because you couldn't do this in any other field. If you were a farmer and you had a field and you wanted to lend it to somebody, rent it to somebody for pasture, you couldn't rent it to 20 other farmers and collect rent from each one. You'd go to jail. But somehow the bankers managed to bamboozle the politicians and the legislators and get the legal right to do that. And in Canada, for example, it's the law. In 1991, our government changed the law from what had been a cash reserve system to a capital adequacy system, which means so much capital they have to keep rather than actual cash in their vaults. And they were allowed to have assets equal to 20 times that capital. In other words, they could lend the same money, same capital to 20 different people or organizations at the same time and collect interest from every single one of them.
Oh, that's nice work if you can get it.
You better believe it. You can get it if you're a bank. And you can't if you're not. But it is to say it's highway robbery is just sort of a misnomer, because highway robbers wind up usually in jail and spend a lot of time for it, whereas the banksters, as we call them,